Hello, and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we'll travel back in time to the 49th Academy Awards, which awarded the films of 1976. Sidney Lumet and Paddy Chayefsky returned to the Oscar race with a bold, satirical look at the television business. Network made a huge splash at the Oscars, landing 10 nominations, including 5 for acting, and going on to win 4 awards. But it was the little underdog that could, Rocky, that weaved its way through the bleaker films it was competing against to win Best Picture. So why did Network ultimately come up short? We'll explore all this and more as we discuss how the Oscar almost went to Network. Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I am your host, Kevin Jacobson, and today I am talking about a very excellent year at the Oscars, if I do say so myself. You last heard this person talking about La La Land way back in my second ever episode in 2016. Now here he is talking about films from 40 years before that. And this person is a co-writer with me at Gold Derby, and that is Mr. Charlie Bright.
Hey, how are ya?
Excellent. Excited to talk about a very rousing film yet again.
Oh, I cannot wait for this one. This is one, I remember when you were first putting out the feelers for this, and I emailed you back after you confirmed me for the second episode, and I said, I got dibs on this year.
Yes, and you had claimed this. This was probably the earliest year that anyone had claimed at that point in the show. So, yeah, this has been a long time in the making. So, here we are. We're finally here. And of course, we're talking about 1976 and the runner-up that I and many others believe it to be Network, that lost to a little underdog film called Rocky. So, Network is a satirical drama about a struggling TV network, UBS, who...
A fictional fourth network.
Thank you. Yes, good to point that out. Who intend to fire their news anchor Howard Beale due to declining ratings. And Beale finds out about this and announces on air that he plans to kill himself live on air at the next Tuesday broadcast. And that kind of causes the ratings to spike, and the powers that be decide to keep him on and let him basically say whatever he wants because it gets good ratings, so who cares? So behind the scenes, we meet the news division president, Max Schumacher, and the very power-hungry, ratings-grabbing network programmer, Diana Christensen, and she offers to basically help him create an entertaining news program by kind of just tapping into the nation's anger. And this leads to Howard Beale launching into his famous ratings grabbing speech to the nation, telling them to yell out, "I'm as mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore." And from there, hijinks ensue. So the film was directed by Sidney Lumet and written by the great Paddy Chayefsky. It stars Peter Finch as Howard Beale, Faye Dunaway as Diana, William Holden as Max, in addition to Robert Duvall, Ned Beatty, Beatrice Straight, and many more. So Network made $23 million at the box office, was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, and won 4 of them, which were above the line, we should note, which is pretty huge, but not Best Picture. So, Charlie, I feel like this is the perfect film for you in particular, and I want you to really just explain why.
Oh, God. Where to start? I mean, this movie, I saw this movie for the first time when I was 15, I want to say. Yeah, like I was 15, maybe late 14, and it was shortly before 9/11, and it was I I've always been fascinated by behind the scenes with media. I love Bill Carter's books that he's written about the television industry, The Late Shift, Desperate Networks, The War for Late Night. I love stuff about that, about media. So this movie was right up my alley. And seeing it, it's insanely funny. It still holds up even 43 years later. In fact, actually, when you read about the reaction that people in the television industry had to this movie, they thought, they were like, "Oh, this is way out of bounds. This is way over the top. Nothing like this would ever happen." And every year it gets, it's like it's topped itself in terms of what we see in terms of our media. It has this amazing message of corporate control of our media. It goes into all of these amazing things, and at the same time, it never feels like it's overloading you. Everything kind of feels organic, or as organic as it can be in this surreal movie. It's heart-wrenching. It's insanely funny. And one of my favorite things to do is, if I ever show this movie to other people, I love watching their reactions and to see if they actually laugh at the places where I think they should be laughing. But it's just one of those movies, and it's just where everything is just a 10 in this movie. The performances, the writing, of course, Chayefsky's writing, Sidney Lumet's direction, which I think is very underrated. Even though as acclaimed as this movie is, I think his direction is very underrated. Just everything, the editing, the way the camera is angled and everything, the way you also feel immersed in this environment. To me, it just hits on every level, and it's a subject that I adore. So that's what, and I've seen this movie probably 20 times. I could probably see it another 20.
Yeah. I kind of had a similar background with seeing Network for the first time, definitely around that 14, 15 age, and was definitely someone getting into like interest in media and how things work behind the scenes, how it's, some of the shady dealings that happen, the backstabbing, all of that sort of thing. And certainly watching it now, and I mean, even in the 2000s, especially with all the, reality show boom and everything, and the cable news boom, that certainly proved to be very prophetic all those years later. And just, watching it as a teenager, I was just like blown away by the writing and blown away by the daringness of like these really awful people who just would do literally anything for ratings, and I mean literally anything, and basically do not bat an eye because they get to keep their jobs and they get to be the number one network, and that's really what matters at the end of the day. And all of that is really crystallized in the Faye Dunaway character, Diana, who is just like a force of nature in this film. Can we agree? Like
Oh God, she is just something else in this movie. I mean, I think seeing this performance, if you were alive in 1976 and you saw this performance, I think the only thought you could have to yourself is, this is the culmination of everything that we have been expecting out of Faye Dunaway. She had blast onto the scene with Bonnie and Clyde, and done other roles, and then you'd think that the zenith would be Chinatown, but she even managed to surpass that.
Yeah, and I guess you could say it's a thoroughly quote unquote unlikable character. And that's not necessarily the type of role that we often see actually winning Oscars from the female side, at least. And so I have to commend the Oscars for at least, appreciating just the totally unique, fascinating character that she creates here. Because, there could have easily just been a moment that is just like a nice thing that humanizes her, or maybe goes back to her past and like tries to explain how she became the person that she is, but she is just this person. Like, this is just who she is.
And what's actually really fantastic about the way that Chayefsky wrote the character is that even when we do get moments that you would think would be more humanizing, or glimpses into her past, it just reinforces everything that we know about her. Like when she says, when she's talking to Max Schumacher and she's saying, "Oh, you gave a lecture at University of Missouri. I was in the front row, had a terrible schoolgirl crush on you." And then later, when I think the scene where this had to be the hardest scene to pull off, because if there was any fault in it, it would have not worked. But the scene, the weekend getaway with her and William Holden, and then when they get back to the motel room, they're hopping into bed, and she is continuing to talk about her ratings and her issues with the terrorist television show she's doing, and she only stops to climax and then collapses into his arms and keeps on going with one of the greatest lines ever. NBC's got a lock on daytime. I'm thinking of starting a homosexual soap opera, The Dykes.
Yes. That is just like her scene that she just commands through and through. And it's just, yeah, she's just something else in this, and I just love her. As far as other performances in this, I mean, this is clearly a huge acting showcase, especially because it's also a writing showcase, because everyone gets these gigantic monologues to spout, which are so juicy and filled with humor and wit, and also really awful characterization, obviously. And Max Schumacher, the William Holden character, is kind of the one who at least trends towards some redemption, by the end of this, as opposed to the rest of the kind of totally mad people around him. And I found his kind of arc to be really fascinating.
It's a very moving performance, I think,
Yes.
because maybe not when it comes to his personal life, but when it comes to the character of Howard Beale, who we'll get to in a moment, played by Peter Finch, he's always very protective of him, because he once it gets into the whole thing of really exploiting him and putting him in danger, that's where he draws the line. And I always think that, and so he was always going to be that kind of anchor.
Yeah,
And
the moral center.
Yeah, and it's just William Holden has this, just this. He's always been that kind of actor where he communicates something just by looking at something. The way, the infamous scene where he is having the discussion with his wife about his affair, and just the look on his face of how pained he is but also being immensely honest at the same time, is just, it's heartbreaking. And then also, several scenes later, when he's having almost the same kind of conversation with Faye Dunaway, when he's saying that, what is it that he said? He says that because when I'm around you, death is all of a sudden a very imminent thing. It's something like that.
Yeah.
And it's just, and you just see like the just everything in his eyes and his face, and it's just perfect.
Yes, it is. And in a film full of speeches, he certainly has those speeches, but I think he delivers them in such like a calm and interesting way to counterbalance everyone else, that I found him you kind of draw yourself into this character, which is why I'm saying, like, it's interesting watching his arc. But then on the flip side, we have Howard Beale. And Howard Beale is really the character that everyone knows from this film. It's a character that, even if people haven't seen Network, have some sense of who this kind of person is, if they don't even know the quote or what he looks like or anything like that. Like, it's a very familiar image, I think, to a lot of people. And Peter Finch, let's talk about this Oscar-winning performance from him.
Oh man, I think this is probably one of the best actor wins that's ever happened. Peter Finch was not that known to American audiences. He had been nominated for an Oscar 5 years before this for a very groundbreaking role in a John Schlesinger movie called Sunday Bloody Sunday. He plays a gay dentist who is in a relationship with another man who is bisexual and is also carrying on a love affair with another woman. The woman played by Glenda Jackson. If you can find that movie, it's a great movie, and his performance is wonderful. And for 1971 to portray an openly gay person, as this as the person who's not a victim, someone who's very confident in who they are, and he brought that very, very beautifully in that character. And so, when he got a chance like this, he just went for it, and every bit of it, just the way he yells these lines, it feels like the line is blurred between what's fact and what's fiction and what's a character with his performance. The way he bellows these monologues, especially the infamous "Mad as Hell" monologue, is just it's sensational. It's hard to find words to describe it, because it's over the top, but at the same time, when you think of everything the country was going through in 1976. I bet you everyone who saw that was like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I never even knew I could put it. I never even knew I felt that way, but that's exactly how I feel.
Yeah, like I didn't know how to put it into words quite like that,
Exactly.
Yeah, and he really is. I've said this a few times on this show, but in terms of theatrical performances, like this is playing to the very last row of the theater.
Yeah, well, that's what it feels like with a lot of these performances, is that, and especially with the rapid fire way they say Patty Chayefsky's dialogue, it feels like a play, because
Right.
everybody has like all the words like all ready to go. They don't even have to think about what they're going to say. It just all comes out. It just naturally comes out of them.
Right.
It feels like you're watching a play, kind of.
Exactly. Yeah. And it certainly is, being staged at the moment, as we know, with Bryan Cranston, I believe. So
yeah, I saw it actually.
Yeah. So how was that actually? Let's. I wanted to know how it felt on a stage.
What the staging is really interesting. Ivo van Hove did the direction. He won a Tony Award a couple of years ago for directing the revival of View from the Bridge, very minimalist revival. It was very good. And he really tries to immerse you in this. You see a countdown clock when you get into the theater. You see all the people that play the technicians are on stage warming up, and just sitting around, chatting with each other. And the weird thing about it, though, is that because everybody's trying to bring their own thing to the characters, these characters that have already been portrayed, they try to take it in a more natural way with the play. So, like when the "Mad as Hell" monologue comes up, Bryan Cranston takes a lot of pauses, like he's waiting for the words to come to his character, and so it's a bit jarring.
Interesting. As far as other actors, we have two big supporting turns here that are basically one scene wonders. One of which is Beatrice Straight, of course, who wins her Oscar and is the shortest performance to ever win an acting Oscar, clocking in at like a little over 5 minutes, I believe.
Yep.
And so, yeah, she basically has one of the few scenes in the film that feel very traditionally like grounded in a sense of reality and a sense of what's actually going on in the real world outside of the bubble of this madness that's going on within this TV news station. And she is, of course, the wife of Max Schumacher, who, Max Schumacher is going off and having an affair with Diana, and Beatrice Straight, she knows about it, in her heart. And she has this big, huge monologue, again, very loud and in your face monologue, and it really just brings everything kind of down to earth for Max and the audience, I think, as well, to really show you like the separation between television and what people are actually going through and the ramifications of your actions, basically. So if that was not in the film, I think it might not be a totally full experience, or it might not be as smart of a film if they just totally focused on everything that's happening in the TV world, if that makes sense.
Oh no, absolutely. And I think, with every one of these characters, I feel like, Chayefsky's writing is going to come up, but with she brings just such heart and emotion to it. She's just, it's just like, that's where your heart really breaks. There are other points of the movie where your heart breaks as well, but I think that's probably the most genuine one. And there are just little touches that I love that she does, and her and William Holden in that one scene have this amazing chemistry with each other. And my personal favorite, and it's this moment where Schumacher is talking about all the different scripts that Diana has in her mind about, you know, what happens and how all of them end up with him leaving Diana and going back to Louise, his wife, because that's what the audience, because the audience wouldn't buy the decaying of the traditional American family.
Right.
And then he says, she does have one script in which I kill myself, an adapted for television version of Anna Karenina, where she's Count Vronsky and I'm Anna. And
yeah.
she just chuckles. And then with a smile and a tear, she says, you're in for some dreadful grief. And I think just with that chuckle and that one line, it just communicates the entire history of their relationship.
Exactly.
Like, you know, it's so brutally honest and tragically honest, but I just love the way she looks when she does that. And again, that chuckle, I just love that chuckle that she gives.
Right.
You know, like she, like, you know, in as much as she is angry at this man, there's still this seed of why they fell in love in the first place.
She still loves him for who he is. Yeah, exactly. And that's actually a good point about kind of the subtleties, I think, in the script, because obviously a lot has been said about all the monologues and how it's very in your face, and, you know, it brings out a lot of emotion, but then they have these little scenes interspersed throughout the film that I think are really nice touches that do ground it in reality. And I wanted to talk now about kind of the story and how it unfolds, because it's utter madness and I love it every time. I just get enraptured in it, especially the beginning, really, and how I think it's just so well crafted how the script manages to build and build and build to that mad as hell point. Because, you know, sometimes I think about Network and I think that particular scene happens like at the very beginning, when it really does not. Like, it's not necessarily the thing that kickstarts everything. It really takes a while to get to that breaking point, and I think there's such tension that's happening between, you know, the network constantly talking about the ratings and everything and wondering what they're going to do with Howard Beale, how they're going to handle this. And when it gets to that point, it just feels like such a great, like, end of Act 1 catharsis that really launches. It's just really great screenwriting, basically, is my point.
Absolutely. And I love, you know, it's one of those movies where I think, like, if you look at most like people that teach how to write a screenplay, they'll always say to avoid narration. Right. But in this one, it actually works. It really does work, because also it feels like the narrator's also, I mean, yes, the narrator is, we don't see the narrator, but it is a character because of just like some of the things that he says. Like when the narrator says at the end of his opening monologue, the news was broken when Max Schumacher tells Howard that he's getting fired. The narrator says the news was being broken to him by his old friend and head of the news division, Max Schumacher. The two old friends were getting properly pissed.
Yeah, I love the little spouts of narration where it's just so, like, dry and delivered in such a way that always kind of makes me laugh. Just the total, like, dark comedy of it is so fun. So let's talk about, like, the actual theme that is being communicated through the Howard Beale speeches, and whether we think, you know, the film is endorsing exactly what Howard Beale is selling to America, and kind of like the evolution of how he's talking about how people have to get mad at the craziness around them, and then it kind of transforms into being mad at the White House and things like that. What parts of this did you feel like you could get on board with, and were there some that you felt like were going too far?
Actually, the concept itself of just getting angry, I never thought that was going off the deep end. It's always this to me, and not just in viewing this movie, but in life. I think getting angry is an important thing, but then the second part is what do you do with that anger? And the weird thing about Howard Beale is he's just telling us to get to that first stage. He says in the Mad as Hell monologue, I don't want you to riot or protest or write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I think there was just this whole thing of just being, at the time, just us being clobbered. The country was being clobbered by so many things. Watergate, the pardon, the economy was going south,
all the violence,
oil, the crime was going up, and of course the Watergate scandal, and the resignation of a president, which had never happened before, which had happened after the resignation of that president's vice president for a criminal matter which was completely unrelated on something completely separate.
Right.
It was a weird time. And I think that was I think it's meant to be viewed as a starting point, but also, I think Howard's message of looking at the bigger picture on certain things, like definitely when he's, I think as wonderful and brilliant as the Mad as Hell monologue is, my personal favorite is actually the monologue he gives after Edward Ruddy dies, the president of the network, and he talks about how this network is now under the control of this conglomerate called CCA, which is the hatchet man for them is played by Robert Duvall, who's so brilliant in that performance.
Yes.
If you didn't know better, because if you ever hear Robert Duvall talk, you're like, oh, this guy's a Southern boy, you would swear that he's from Brooklyn or something because of the way he speaks. He's so good at it.
Yes.
Like when he says, "I got a big fat big titted head," it's so great.
That was a good impression, actually.
But that monologue to me is absolutely ingenious, because I think that was talking about something that I don't think a lot of people could fathom. But when you look at media now, you have only a handful of companies that control basically almost everything. Just look at the big networks now. Fox is owned by News Corp, ABC is owned by Disney, NBC Electric. Now they're I guess Universal / Comcast.
Yeah.
And CBS is owned by Viacom. It's absolutely insane, and it's exactly what Howard says. When the 12th largest company in the world controls the most awesome propaganda force in the whole world, who knows what's going to be peddling for truth over the network? And it was weird when I saw this movie for the first time. I mentioned it was shortly before 9/11. I was just really starting to get into politics. And of course, I was still, I was still in high school at the time. So I was always pissed that George W. Bush had won the presidency, or stolen the presidency, as I said. And, I think that was part of it, get mad, and, find out what to do with that afterwards. But you can't start to do something unless you harness that anger and understand the core reason as to why, things need to change.
Yes. And again, this is really another instance where the film is prophetic, because I saw a random piece floating around last year about how whenever there was a whole bunch of news in the news about a bunch of horrible stuff, basically from the White House to all sorts of things. And there was this article that was basically no, this isn't normal. You're okay to be feeling like this, basically. You're okay to be feeling anger and confusion about the state of the world.
Yeah.
And, that was last year. And so, these things kind of happen in cycles in a way that I find really interesting. And I think the film also comments very well on, obviously, the state of infotainment, things like that, and reality television, and the exploitation of people who probably should not be, basically mocked and watched from afar. like zoo animals, basically. And that is obviously commentary on reality television. I have an interesting story about Survivor. I don't know how much crossover is with this podcast with people who watch Survivor, or at least anymore. But I'm just going to say this anyway, since I still watch it 19 years later. So what can I say? The Survivor All-Stars reunion, which was in 2004, so this was a few years after the boom of Survivor, there was a woman named Jerry Manthe, who was a big villain on the show. And on the All-Stars reunion, she made a very good point, because the season had been populated basically by people who knew each other, and they were backstabbing each other, and there was lots of drama and crying and things like that, because people's feelings were being hurt and basically being exploited on national television. And she made a point during the reunion to say, like, this isn't right. We shouldn't be like watching these relationships basically crumble on screen for your entertainment. And then she was very loudly booed at the reunion show. And she left the stage basically in tears. And it just like reminded me exactly of kind of the state of what network is trying to say, just in terms of like, this is just kind of what we want on our base human level. This idea of watching people who are extraordinary in some way, or prophetic in the case of Howard Beale. And it's why we flock to people like, all the Fox News people, essentially, to find answers or to be entertained, or any combination of things. And so there's just so many different layers to this film that I think translates so well to what we are currently dealing with in this nation and all over the world. So pretty good movie.
I mean, part of me, wishes Patty Chayefsky were still alive, because I don't know what he would make of what's going on right now.
Yeah.
I have a feeling he'd probably try to avoid partisanship and just try to stay with more overarching themes. But, the combination of this and stuff like Brexit, and I think he would give us, like another great American masterpiece if he were still alive today.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. And I definitely believe that Aaron Sorkin is trying to do that.
Okay, I was actually, you have no idea how much I was withholding that this is just everything Aaron Sorkin has done has been in an effort to emulate network, even going as far in some of his projects as just calling out Patty Chayefsky's name in itself. I don't know if you ever saw his show Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip.
Oh, yes.
Which starts in its pilot episode with Judd Hirsch going on a Howard Beale-like rant. And then it's like what happens when he's brought into the network head's office is just like when Beale's brought in, because they're watching all the other networks' coverage of that, and they're all talking about it. Mm-hmm. And it's just, oh God, it's just one of the craziest things.
Yeah. He is clearly very inspired by Patty Chayefsky, to the point that he even referenced him in his Oscar acceptance speech for The Social Network. So
I forgot about that.
Yeah. So clearly this is basically Aaron Sorkin's wet dream.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Just saying. So I actually wanted to talk a little bit about the relationship that forms in this film between Max and Diana, and just like how that evolves, and whether we think it works in the, compared to some of the satirical TV news stuff that's going on. Like, did you buy this as a romance, or did you just see this the whole time as just like these two people are using each other?
I always saw it as, if anybody was using anybody, it was definitely Diana using Max.
Yes.
But I do think that there was, a nugget of something there, in the way that, if you would, for certain people, admiration can lead to a physical attraction. We see this all the time sometimes in like politics and in consensual relationships, but also in media and all sorts of industries where, an older person who has more experience, a younger person who may look up to them, and it may not be true love, but they do have a genuine connection with each other. And I bought that. mainly because of the way they were, because of the sly way they, the dialogue, with each other that they had with each other is what really sold it to me. You know,
Right.
I just love like when she's there watching him and she's talking about Sybil the soothsayer and everything she says, Max just has a quick comeback, and then she's just like, I'm taking over the show one way or the other. And and I just love like, and when he goes, do you have any plans tonight? And she just, without even looking, just picks up the phone, dials, and goes, I can't make it home tonight, love, I'll call you later. Then just hangs up.
Yeah.
And my favorite part of that is when Max goes to get his coat, and he says to himself, schmuck, what are you getting yourself into?
Yeah, I definitely,
I bought it.
yeah, I definitely buy it too. I think on her part, certainly, like when he even brings up the idea that things might get personal between them, she's like, fine, whatever, we can get into a relationship. And it's almost as if to say, like, I'm trying to kind of advance my career in a way, and saying like, I'll do whatever I want, like, sure, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And on his part, certainly some of the classic tropes of like, I have this wife for 25 years, maybe the passion isn't there anymore, this is this crazy exciting new person, so
Who has all this energy.
yes, exactly. So much energy. So yeah, I agree. I haven't heard a lot of discussion about this relationship compared to like a lot of the other themes that are going on in the film, but I found that they like weirdly deserved each other in some way throughout most of this film.
In a weird way for a period of time, but
Yeah,
then
but right, yeah.
then by the end, it's just like what Max is just like, yeah, this is not working.
Right, exactly. Any good quotes that you wanted to note before we sort of move on to Oscars?
Well, there are some other characters I think we haven't talked about. Arthur Jensen,
Yes.
the Ned Beatty character, and that's another one where one scene, or technically two scenes, he has lines, but that scene where you have meddled with the primal forces of nature. Oh man, that is unbelievable. That is just one of my all-time favorites. It's so good.
Yes.
So good. And also, again, about the way that that the world was changing. The world was before globalism was really coming into its own. Which made all the more sense about how he's like, there's no more nations. There's only IBM, ITT, AT&T, and Exxon.
Yep.
And Exxon continues to be the most profitable company in the world. And it's just, oh man, he just nails that scene. Actually, that was actually my one big qualm with the play version of Network, is that the version of Arthur Jensen in the play doesn't. He delivers that same monologue, but he does it in a very calm manner. And it's like, no, this does not work. The reason Arthur Jensen does this is because he knows he has to make it look like Howard Beale is seeing the face of God. And so he has to come down with fire and brimstone about this.
Right.
And I just love that he went there, and Ned Beatty earned an Oscar. I think that's his only career Oscar nomination. But damn, is for one scene, man, he earned it.
Yes, exactly.
He earned it with that.
And I love that it is on that level, and then he gets to that point where he's like, am I getting through to you, Mr. Beale? It's so good.
I would also want to go into two other characters. I'm trying to find the name of Marlene Warfield, who plays Lorraine Hobbs.
Yeah.
And what's his name? It's Arthur Berghart, who plays the great Ahmed Khan. In this other subplot that we have, this crazy subplot.
Almost forgot about that, yeah.
Where Faye Dunaway commissions a series based on the acts of an actual terrorist organization
Yes.
and using the Communist Party as their intermediary to communicate with them. And I love the introduction that Diana and Lorraine have with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Diana says, "I'm Diana Christensen, a racist lackey of the imperialist, culture," or something like that. And Lorraine Hobbs goes, "I'm Lorraine Hobbs, a badass commie," and then the N-word.
Yes.
And Tim Payne Dunaway says, "Sounds like the basis of a firm friendship."
Yes.
So, and then, when she's going all ape shit over, just, the contract negotiation.
Oh my God, I love that.
Oh God, the point with the Communist Party is going all about, "No, I am not letting this man fuck with my distribution costs." And my favorite is and then the guy who plays the great Ahmed Khan, who's the head of the terrorist organization, the Ecumenical Liberation Army, which has kidnapped an heiress named Marianne Gifford, who is actually played by Kathy Cronkite,
Yes.
daughter of Walter Cronkite, who had issues with her being in this movie.
Understandably, maybe.
I love this. He has two great moments in this movie. When Diana first pitches the TV show to Lorraine, Lorraine goes to their compound and walks in. She goes, "Ahmed, I'm going to make you a TV star. You're going to be a household name, just like Archie Bunker." And he turns to her and goes, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And the other great moment is when she's going with this whole thing about the contract negotiations. When they're all yelling at each other, he just with these lawyers from the network, which is just hilarious to see them in this compound.
Yes.
He just pulls out his gun, fires into the air, and goes, "Man, give her the fucking overhead claws." Let's turn back to page 28, small c. Subsidiary rights.
Yeah.
It's so great, crazy, and it's bonkers, but it's absolutely brilliant.
It is. Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned that. That definitely gave me one of the biggest laughs on this watch again. And I always forget about that.
And then you see the one of the lawyers, who, of course, all the lawyers are white, and
yes,
probably the most uptight of them just goes, "I knew he was going to do that. I knew he was going to do that."
Oh my God. Yeah. One quote that I just wanted to mention because it always gives me a big laugh is near the beginning where Howard Beale is going off on a diatribe, and then someone from a affiliate, I think, or something, calls Max, and Max just says, "He's saying that life is bullshit," and it is. So what are you screaming about?
And then I love the woman goes, "Mr. Hackett's on the line for you. Tell Mr. Hackett to go fuck himself." And he has that voice to him that you just hear it and you're like, yeah, you're someone who's been doing this for 25 years.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Or I also love the other line that Max has, and this is in the beginning when Howard first says that he's going to kill himself when they're both drunk. Mm-hmm. And he goes, "Yeah, we'll make a series out of it. Suicide of the Week. Hell, what?" And he just goes on with it, and then he just goes, "I love it. Suicides, executions, mad bombers, the death hour, a great Sunday night show for the whole family." And as if that wasn't good enough, he tops it with, "We'd wipe that fucking Disney right off the air."
Oh, man. But one other one I just wanted to mention is when the Howard is going into the building and the security guard is like, "How do you do, Mr. Beale?" And he's like, "I have to make my witness." And he's like, "Sure thing, Mr. Beale."
It's so brilliant. He walks in with his pajamas and an overcoat, soaking wet, and he just yells, "I must make my witness." And he goes, "Sure thing, Mr. Beale."
Just the way it's delivered is so great.
Oh yeah, no, it's absolutely perfect.
Yes. Oh man. So yeah, it's an incredible movie. I mean, it's, as we've kind of outlined, it's chock full of incredible lines, very funny, but also very incisive and prophetic. And, comments on the business of news, the business of television, like how it affects the public, and how we look to our entertainment, and, all how all the traumas of the world have desensitized us basically to everything.
Because we have the access to it now.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's even more so the case now that we have like YouTube and Twitter and all these things, because that's
Everyone
another
has
thing.
a camera on their phone now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. Like, this is a world where there's 3 TV stations, and like most of the public is watching these 3 stations. And that's where you can get like 60 million people watching the Howard Beale show. And, now we're in a climate where everything is very niche and very splintered. Some people obviously don't even watch television anymore, but at the same time, these problems still persist, like I said, with YouTube and things like that. So yeah, it's an incredible movie then, it's an incredible movie now. So if you haven't seen it, it's one of my favorite films of all time. So
and it also has one of the greatest final lines ever in a movie.
Yes, this is a good way to end it.
Yes. Of course, I'll just say the line. The line is,
okay.
This was the story of Howard Beale, the first known instance of a man who was killed because he had lousy ratings.
There you have it. Such a great line. Ugh. Yeah. Okay. So when we come back, we will be discussing why Network lost Best Picture to a little underdog movie called Rocky.
And now, the distinguished television news commentator, Mr. Howard Beale.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like at this moment to announce that I will be retiring from this program in 2 weeks' time because of poor ratings. Since this show was the only thing I had going for me in my life, I have decided to kill myself. I'm going to blow my brains out right on this program a week from today.
What the hell's going on?
Prepare yourself for a perfectly outrageous motion picture.
Howard Beale went up there last night and said what every American feels, that he's tired of all the bull.
Sakes, Diana, we're talking about putting a manifestly irresponsible man on national television.
I am not putting Howard back on the air.
It's not your show anymore, Max. It's mine.
I got a feeling I'm being made.
You are.
Got to warn you, I don't do anything on my first date.
We'll see. I want a show developed based on the activities of a terrorist group.
Well, Ahmed, I'm gonna make a TV star out of you. Just like Archie Bunker.
That's the #1 show in television!
We're number one! There is no America. There is no democracy. There is only IBM and DuPont and Exxon. And you have meddled with the primal forces of nature. And you will atone. Am I getting through to you, Mr. Beale?
Why me?
Because you're on television, dummy.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Network News Hour with Howard Beale.
I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. Things have got to change.
How many stations does this go out?
You've got to get mad.
67.
You've got to say...
And we're back. Now we will be discussing why Network lost Best Picture to Rocky. Network was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director for Sidney Lumet, Best Actor for Peter Finch, Best Actor again for William Holden, Best Actress for Faye Dunaway, Best Supporting Actor for Ned Beatty, Best Supporting Actress for Beatrice Straight, Best Original Screenplay, Best Cinematography, and Best Film Editing, and it walked away with 4 of them, including Best Actor, Peter Finch, Best Actress, Faye Dunaway, Best Supporting Actress, Beatrice Straight, and Best Original Screenplay for Patty Chayefsky. So before the Oscars, Network won the WGA for Original Screenplay, obviously, and it tied with the Los Angeles Film Critics Best Picture Prize with Rocky, believe it or not. So Rocky, before the Oscars, won the Golden Globe for drama and the DGA. Meanwhile, we had a movie like All the President's Men that did pretty well with critics, pretty much sweeping most of the Best Picture prizes outside of Los Angeles. So I think we had an interesting sort of 3-way race here, where I think maybe you could even make the case that All the President's Men could have been in contention for a runner-up spot as well. But I'll just say here that one of the reasons why I chose Network for this is because it gets 4 above-the-line wins, including 3 actors, and acting is the biggest branch of the Academy. Yeah, do the math. So let's talk about why Rocky wins Best Picture over all these movies.
I actually think it can be pretty well summed up by a line that Faye Dunaway has in Network. When she's talking about her audience research report that she sent to everyone, and she says, in a nutshell, it said, the American people are turning sullen. They've been clobbered on all sides by Vietnam, Watergate, the inflation, the depression. They've turned off, shot up, and they fucked themselves limp, and nothing helps. And I think that was where America was in 1976. America was going through just stuff that it had never seen before. Of course, America was celebrating its bicentennial, and was in the middle. And I think the thing about Rocky is not only is it a feel good movie, it makes you feel good about America.
Yeah.
The idea that only in America could someone get that once in a lifetime shot. And I think people, as especially when you look at the Best Picture race and movies like All the President's Men, Network, and absolutely Taxi Driver, that have these very bleak visions of the country and where the country was. Rocky just made you feel good about the country. It reminded you of what you were taught when you were in kindergarten, about America being the most prosperous nation on earth. So I think people wanted to feel good about that again. And I think Rocky was just the perfect vehicle for that.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's one of these things that I feel like it's very understandable why a movie like Rocky wins, especially in a year like this, especially 2 years after Richard Nixon resigns. It's like, it's kind of at the perfect time, basically, this film.
Absolutely.
And for what it's worth, it's also a movie that it's not necessarily like this big budget crowd pleaser that maybe things like Creed might have come, Creed 2 especially, things like, how it would become a franchise. It's very like small scale Rocky.
Yeah, the producers, I believe, that one of the producers said that he did not expect it to be a big blockbuster.
Yeah,
he expected it to be a double. The second feature at a double bill at a drive-in.
Right.
But it just got that. It just hit at the right time. I also think that. I just blanked there for a second, but it'll come back to me later. It's just one of those movies that just hit the... but you also think to yourself, if you ever talk to anybody who saw Rocky in the theaters in 1976, that was an experience. That was an experience that is very rarely been replicated in the past 43 years, where you have people, and by the end of the movie, even when Rocky is finding out that he's lost and he doesn't care anymore, he's just screaming, yo, Adrian, you have everyone in the theater is standing up and cheering as loud as they can. I was talking with my mom about this, she saw Rocky in the theater, and I said, she was like, yeah, everyone's standing up and yelling at the top of their lungs, for joy and happiness. And it was a cultural, experience.
Yeah, exactly. And also that feeling, I think, is summed up by one of the stars of Rocky, Burgess Meredith, who said I got this from Inside Oscar. I don't know.
I actually just read that chapter last night.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Well, excuse me. He said of the film's appeal, it's a refreshing change after things like Taxi Driver and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Brilliant pictures, perhaps, but not rooting pictures. Mm-hmm. It's the difference between watching a sunset and a snake.
And he's absolutely right about that, and it's just the weird thing. So I had not seen Rocky until 2 days ago.
Ever?
I'd never seen Rocky.
Oh wow.
I know.
Okay.
So I finally watched it, and it's great. But here's the thing that really caught me off guard. There's not a lot of boxing in the movie.
No, there's really not. It's a lot of just human drama.
Yeah, it's just, Sylvester Stallone won't shut up, about anything, but that's the charm of his character.
Yeah.
Paulie is just the biggest asshole I've ever seen. Well, not ever, but definitely, top tier.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's not until Gonna Fly Now happens. When Gonna Fly Now happens, just out of that infamous Bill Conti music, and then the montage, which of course the Rocky franchise would perfect, the infamous montages. When he's running up those steps at what is it, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, I think it is, where they actually now have a statue of Rocky Balboa there.
There you go. Yeah.
When he's running up those steps, and you hear it, that music and that song, that's where everything picks up. And that's where you're like, all right, I'm all in.
Yeah, and all of that buildup is worth it just to get to that moment. Yeah, exactly. It is. It's just a rootable underdog story. It's like the quintessential American story. And it is the kind of movie that, as people have talked about before, like it's the kind of movie you can sit anyone down in front of and they'll just be wowed by how it makes them feel at the end of the day. And to me, it's not the kind of thing that like, oh, it's just a movie that makes people feel good, but otherwise it doesn't have any good qualities about it. I think it still is pretty well written, I must say. Sylvester Stallone, who writes this film, I think it's not the most original script in the world by any means, but I think it's you are able to get attached to the characters very easily, and the relationship between the two of them and all the dynamics happening. And I think
it is actually kind of original in that the hero doesn't win the fight at the end.
That is true.
I think that was probably the most ingenious thing that he could have done, because
right.
I guess if he had won, it would have felt a little contrived.
Yeah.
But just the fact that it goes all the big fight goes all 15 rounds, and he's still standing, and he drew that thing out for all. And and of course also the fact that he doesn't care that he lost, he just wants Adrian. So right. It's just. It really, I think, does succeed on that level, and really, and I think differentiated itself that way.
Yeah, and that is a very poignant, kind of bittersweet ending that I think does work for kind of the message of the film, which is this idea of a person who kind of is counted out in many portions of his life and has to work his way up, and even though he still can't get to that point where he's defeating like these professionals, he is still content with himself and happy with his life and proud of how far he's come. And even if he wins or loses, it doesn't matter because he got to this point. So it's a nice message. It's a nice story. So,
and also just I think you shouted him out earlier, but Burgess Meredith is so good as Mickey.
yeah.
In the movie. Although he just has that gravelly voice, which is just perfect. To be a good fighter instead of some second-rate loan shark. Although the weird thing is that, so for your younger viewers who may not know, Burgess Meredith, before he was in Rocky, he was most known for playing the original Penguin in the TV version of Batman with Adam West. And the weird thing is that every time I heard him talk, I was just waiting for him to go, wah, 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 wah.
That's basically what the performance is, and I love it for it.
Oh, no, it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of these things, especially when you look at the competition, where it's just the movie that, you look at the others, and I feel like they split the vote as far as the critically acclaimed dark examinations of the human existence.
Yeah.
Or at least American existence, I guess, in this case.
Actually, I do think with those other three, at least, Taxi Driver, All the President's Men, and Network, yeah, definitely, I think they're uniquely American stories.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That it makes sense that Rocky wins in the end. So I wanted to get to several questions that we got about both Network and Rocky before we move on to all the other movies this year that came out. We got two questions, sort of questions, mostly just declarative statements along the same lines. This is from Joe Gouveia, who said, Network, great movie or greatest movie?
Oh, Joe, you made my night. I have to say, I think Network is probably just short of greatest, because I think my all-time favorite movie will always be The Godfather.
Sure.
But Network, close second.
Yeah. And Amy Thomason, guest on this show from the ET episode.
Oh, I loved her on that episode. She was so great.
Yes. She said, Network, great screenplay or greatest screenplay?
I think it may just be one of the greatest screenplays ever written.
Yeah.
I think probably, and if there was a race, it'd probably be between Network and from 2 years prior, Chinatown.
Chinatown. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I actually heard someone say, I think it was Larry Gelbart, the creator of MASH, writer of Tootsie, who said he thought that Robert Towne was the greatest screenwriter ever, and that you could go to film school and just study Chinatown for 4 years.
Right. Exactly. And The Godfather is very well written itself, so we must say. Great. A lot of the greatest screenplays of all time seem to come from this very decade, so I'm loving this era that I'm covering right now.
Oh, it's so much fun.
Yes. Jeffrey Kerr asked, if the SAG Awards took place back then, do you think Network would have won Best Ensemble? I think it definitely could have.
I think so. I think so, because it definitely
What would be the competition?
Well, I think you would probably get Rocky in there, President's Men, which would be a good one, which would be a good contender for that as well. I don't think Taxi Driver would make it in there.
Doesn't really have an ensemble.
It has a great cast, though.
It does, yeah. But
you think
in
De
terms
Niro,
of super substantial, meaty roles,
just like you go on the stuff, De Niro, Jodie Foster, Sybil Shepherd, Albert Brooks, Peter Boyle, and Harvey Keitel. That's pretty damn good.
It is good, yeah.
I don't think that would have been nominated. I don't know about Bound for Glory, which is the 5th Best Picture nominee. I don't know what would be in there. Maybe, I don't know, Marathon Man, or I honestly don't know. Maybe Murder by Death would have snuck its way in there.
That's true.
Because it's one of those comedic ensembles.
Yeah.
I think it would have definitely stood a damn good chance of winning. And I think a lot of us, like, if the internet had been around and we were all there, prognosticating in the 70s, we probably would have, there would be a good chunk of people thinking it would win.
Right, exactly. I agree. Multiple people wanted us to talk about Peter Finch, and the kind of lead or supporting thing that happened here. So Gordon at Mark Wahlberg said, if Peter Finch had been nominated in supporting actor and presumably won there as well, do you think that William Holden would have won in lead, giving Network a clean sweep of acting?
I don't. That's a good question, and I don't know. William Holden actually was speaking with someone a couple of years after this happened, and he said, you know, if that son of a bitch hadn't died, I would have had my second Oscar. I honestly don't know. I think that it's possible Stallone could have won because that, you know, Rocky definitely had a lot of support there, had a lot of support in the Academy. Part of me also thinks that possibly De Niro would have won because even though it was just 2 years after his supporting win for Godfather 2, I mean, that performance in Taxi Driver is so undeniable.
Yeah, it is.
And became so instantly iconic and disturbing and riveting on all those levels. I think De Niro might have won.
Yeah, that was going to be my thing that I said here, is that I feel like De Niro, I mean, he literally swept all of the critics' prizes for this role, like every single one, all the major ones at least. And so I feel like there was enough buzz for him. And this was such like a psychologically crazy, fascinating, dark role for him that I almost do feel like they would have felt more than happy to give him this Oscar. So even if it was 2 years later.
So I think we should just clarify for people that don't know this about Peter Finch. So Peter Finch had wanted at the studio, MGM, which was distributing it, wanted him to go supporting. That was their plan, and he said absolutely not. There's no movie without Howard Beale. He's a lead, and I agree with him because the narrator says in the very first line of the movie, this is the story of Howard Beale. So, you know, you can't escape that. He's also, so he decided to campaign and lead. He was making the rounds like crazy. And then 2 weeks before the Golden Globes, Sidney Lumet went to the Beverly Hills Hotel to pick him up. They were going to do Good Morning America. And in the lobby, Peter Finch collapsed. He was taken to UCLA Medical Center where he was pronounced dead. And 2 weeks later, he won the Golden Globe and then went on to win the Oscar, posthumous acting winner, until Heath Ledger won several decades later, both coincidentally Australians. And I think that's just, I don't know what the voting timeline was for the Golden Globes. But part of me thinks that this would have been the kind of thing that the Oscars would have rewarded anyway.
Yeah,
it seems like that kind. Yeah, it seems like that kind of role that just would have won, that probably would have won anyway. So I think he's absolutely in the right category. It doesn't bother me at all that he went lead, especially because he won.
Yeah, there you go. Because we did get a few questions that were like, well, Fritz and the Oscars and Daniel B said basically the same thing of, would you say Peter Finch is a supporting actor in this movie? And also Daniel B said, was Peter Finch an all-time bad case of category fraud?
Nope. I'd say absolutely not, because even it's sort of like, Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs. Even when he's not on screen, you're thinking about him.
Yeah.
And here's just something that's really interesting about this movie. This is a movie where 3 people win Oscars, but none of them are on screen with each other at the same time.
Oh, yeah, that is interesting.
They're in scenes together, like the Mad as Hell scene, but you're cutting between Howard Beale, Peter Finch, and Faye Dunaway. They're never on screen at the same time.
I never picked up on that. Wow.
It's a weird thing.
And they're I guess they're all connected by William Holden.
Exactly.
That's kind of fascinating. Well, 49er mega fan said, do you think William Holden, who in my opinion gave the much more nuanced performance than Peter Finch, deserved to win Best Actor?
I still think Peter Finch deserved to win Best Actor. I'm gonna be honest that I think that part of it was that part of it is that William Holden did win a Best Actor Oscar in 1953 for Stalag 17, and so I think he's kind of like taken care of.
Right.
But his performance is magnificent. There's no denying that William Holden's performance is magnificent. But I do love I think the level of the fact that Finch made his iconic is what really separates that out to me.
Yeah, I agree. I would probably rank both Finch and De Niro above Holden, but they're all fantastic in different ways. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's just the role is a lot more subtle than Peter Finch by a lot of measures. So I understand it. Yeah. Our old pal Andrew Carden has something to say about Rocky.
Oh, well.
Who says, Talia Shire in Rocky, lead or supporting? And do you think she would have triumphed in the latter category?
I think she could have. I think she probably could have triumphed in supporting.
Yeah.
But that was also her decision.
Yep.
She was very adamant that she wanted to go lead. And I think that's honestly a role where either way it actually kind of works, because she is the primary female character, but we do see her enough throughout the whole thing that I think to call her a lead it is justified.
I think she's supporting. That's my feeling just from
Haven't
watching.
you ever heard that the guest is always right?
Who said that again?
I don't know, some person.
Yeah. Anyway, so I do think she would have won in supporting, especially with the fact that the film won Best Picture. It would have been an interesting way to reward it with an acting win. Although it would be kind of odd to be like, oh, here's Rocky, Best Picture, and we're giving it to Adrian, for acting. But all right, that could just be the way it worked out. I mean, clearly based on the competition and the fact that Beatrice Straight does win, I don't mean to diss Beatrice Straight by any means, but the fact that she can win with just one 5-minute scene over competition that has a lot more screen time is probably an indication that they weren't going to go in any of those other directions. And so I think Talia Shire easily could have benefited from that.
Yeah, and I think her strongest competition was Jodie Foster, but as amazing as that performance is, I think that there are a lot of people in the Academy that would be very wary of giving an Oscar to someone for playing a 14-year-old prostitute.
Yes, and that is understandable, I suppose. But I also wanted to just quickly note here before we get into the rest of this race, how I find it quite interesting that this year kind of parallels the year we are just now going through at the Oscars, the 91st Academy Awards, because we have, first of all, we have another A Star is Born here. So there's that. Doesn't quite get the same reception as far as, total nominations by any means, but it's still present and still wins. And we also have 2 foreign language films being nominated for Best Director. And that is the first time that has happened this year since the year we're talking about. So just some interesting parallels I wanted to point out before we get into the rest of this.
Yeah, and one of those people was Lena Wertmuller, the first woman ever to be nominated for directing.
Correct. Yes.
I just wanted to also throw in about the times that Network was taking place. And remember, the country had also just been through a very, very divisive presidential election in 1976. A lot of people, if you don't know the history, may think that Carter was swept into office because of all the bad stuff with Watergate and Ford pardoning Nixon and Vietnam. But that election was really close. Carter had started with a big lead, but eventually Ford caught up, and it wasn't until 3 a.m. Election night that networks were able to project that Jimmy Carter had been elected when they called Mississippi. And I know that's strange for some of your younger viewers, the idea of Mississippi going for a Democrat, but it did happen, and but it was a very, very razor thin election. So I mean, it seems like those types of things have only gotten, the divisions have only gotten amplified, but they were still there back in the 70s.
I was going to say, seems like divisive times sound very familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Let's talk about, might as well, go right into the presidential film in this race now, which is All the President's Men. Another very iconic film from this year. Again, I could have had an argument to say this could have been the runner-up, like it also wins 4 Oscars. It wins for writing, it wins for supporting actor for Jason Robards, and I think it also has characters that maybe are a little more rootable than the characters in Network, so people might feel a little better about going with a movie that they feel like they can relate to these characters more so than like the monsters in Network per se.
Yeah.
But regardless, what do we think of All the President's Men?
All the President's Men is fantastic. I watched it again a couple months ago, and it's just, it's amazing how it takes this story of these reporters that were just starting off to, reporting on a break-in, on this break-in, and who are these people that, were trying to, burglarize the Democratic National Committee headquarters. And it just showed how it was just a snowball. It just spiraled and spiraled. And then at the same time as it's spiraling and they're beginning to put the pieces together, it becomes a suspense film because they're worried about, they're reporters in Washington, D.C., the center of power, and they're worried about, their safety. Nixon was famously paranoid, so they don't know if he's like sending hired goons out for them or something. It does a great job at taking something that could just be a mundane, journalistic investigation and turn it into, kind of a suspenseful thriller.
Yes, I agree. And it's another case, just like Network, that I think really takes its time to tell its story and build and build and build to the end. So yeah, it's just one of these films that we get from the 70s, especially, that is just so well made, just on a craft level, in a way that movies like this don't necessarily get that kind of respect. I mean, there are parallels here with obviously Spotlight, which wins Best Picture a few years ago, in terms of just a story about good journalists doing their job and not necessarily being totally like swept up in big narratives and going public with things, and they just do their jobs very well.
And you also have damn it, I just lost my train of thought again. I'm really bad at this, so
yeah. You're doing great. And I mean, I just look at the image of the ending, really, to sum up the film, which is the TV is in the foreground of Nixon in the election and everything, and in the background,
it's been reelected, isn't it?
Right. Yes, exactly. And in the background, it's just Woodward and Bernstein typing up the report, and it's just like a quiet office, and they're just typing and typing, and it's just such a striking image to, in a way, almost parallel what Network is sort of talking about also, in terms of television and how it packages news compared to what newspapers, at least at this time period, like, we're really getting into serious things that were happening in the world and exploring them on a real genuine level compared to like all the pomp and circumstance of television. So,
and also, what's really striking about All the President's Men is that movie came out less than 2 years. That movie was released less than 2 years after Nixon resigned.
I know.
He resigned in August of 74. That movie was in theaters April of 76. So, I mean, you think of another film where Ben Bradley is a character, The Post, and how that was rushed, and see how it was rushed. Although part of me thinks that if they had taken their time, it probably would have been pretty much the same. But here's where they were just on it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, like wondering if something like this could happen again, like nowadays with all the Trump stuff, any sort of investigations that might come from this. Who knows how, I mean, I know there's this Roger Ailes film that's coming out, Fair and Balanced, about Fox News and things like that, but I'm just curious to see what might come from this era, and if it comes very soon after, or if we're prepared for it to come this soon after.
I don't think we're prepared for anything when it comes to that, but that's another
That is fair.
for another day.
Yes. So we got a handful of questions about All the President's Men, which one was from Cameron McCrae, who said, how do you think the presidential election that year affected All the President's Men's chances? Were people trying to move on from Watergate and that hurt All the President's Men? And would it have done better if released a year earlier or even a couple years later?
I don't know about a couple years earlier, a couple years later. I think it did. It did really well. It won 4, and was a series and did really well with the critics groups at the time. I think that I can't see the election between Ford and Carter really affecting it, because I think it was what really affected it was its view of the past and being so directly related to these other aspects that, Network and Taxi Driver were touching on, which was, the darkness of the time that we as a nation were going through. So I think that probably played more of a factor than the presidential election. Though, it would have been interesting if Ford had been elected president, and that might have helped this one. That might have taken this one to the next level, because, of course, one of the things that Ford had done that was extremely controversial was that he pardoned Nixon. He granted Nixon a pardon for any crimes he did or may have committed. Though, actually, if you actually look and listen to why Ford did what he did, it's actually kind of understandable. And I actually think he probably made the right choice. Though if you read his writings, it's definitely something that he agonized over for a while.
Interesting. Yeah, I do wonder, because, I'm sure this always happens with presidential years. Like, when there is an election, that it is more in the air, the state of us.
You also had that year the strongest intra-party primary that a sitting president had ever had to go through in '76, when a young upstart former governor of California named Ronald Reagan challenged Jerry Ford for the nomination. And it wasn't until really late during the first balloting at that convention in Kansas City that when Wyoming was announcing their delegates, that Ford went over the top.
Mm-hmm.
So, you also had not just division between Democrats and Republicans, you also had a huge division between Republicans and Democrats, because Carter was not what you would normally think of when it came to your mainstream Democrats. So, there was division going all around. There was enough for everybody.
Yes. And all of this really underlines why Rocky won.
Exactly.
This is from Padre George, who said, do you think Jane Alexander's nomination for All the President's Men was a coattail or inspiring one? Well,
I'm trying to remember who Jane Alexander played.
She is the bookkeeper. Yes, it's a small role.
I think it's probably a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B.
Yes.
I think with certain people, it was, if it had just been one or the other, that probably wouldn't have gotten her a nomination. But the fact that you had some people, saying, what, I really liked her in that. And other people going, well, yeah, she was in All the President's Men. I really like that. Let's just throw her in there.
Yes,
Yeah.
I did think she got swept in kind of along for the ride. I don't think she got many prizes or nominations even before that. So definitely in along for the ride. And I think she is very good in the film in the few scenes that she has. She has a very haunted kind of performance. And I respect Jane Alexander. I'm glad that she got this nomination. I thought she did very well in Kramer versus Kramer as well, kind of subtly stealing the show from Dustin Hoffman once again. So yeah, I think it's inspiring and it's also a coattail. So yes, it's both. Okay, so let's talk Taxi Driver.
Oh man, I haven't seen that movie in several years.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it in a long time either, so I just wanted to rewatch it again for this, and still holds up, I must say.
It is a gritty. I think if you actually look up, I think gritty is a term that we use a lot these days. But actually, I think if you were to look up gritty cinema in a dictionary, you'd find Taxi Driver right there.
Yes, it's pretty much the epitome. Yeah.
Yeah, I think William Friedkin brilliantly put it that it's the best film about urban paranoia that's ever been made. It's just about a man trying to, come to terms with everything in the world and then also just losing it.
Yes.
It's stunning.
Yeah. And it taps into a little bit of, again, I'm going back to comparing it to Network. Like it taps into sort of that feeling of there's something very wrong here in the world. And I'm trying to put my finger on what it is. And I'm very mad about it. And I need to figure out a way to channel that. And he channels that in very dark, violent ways, as we know.
I love the scene where he's watching television. And he has the television on the stand and and he has his foot on the stand and he's pushing it back and he's rocking it back and forth. And then he just...
And you're just waiting for it to fall.
And then it finally does, the television breaks, and then you're like, oh, fuck, this is going into a whole nother level.
He snapped.
Yeah,
yes. Yes. Yeah, and I think it's also kind of a movie that maybe some, I guess, younger edgy men tend to co-opt for kind of like idolizing Travis
Either
Bickle.
that or Reservoir Dogs.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's very much like they kind of commodify what Travis Bickle kind of represents in a way that's rather unsettling.
Yeah.
But that is certainly the case for a lot of Martin Scorsese films over the years.
And that was one of his earlier movies. I think his first was Mean Streets, right? Was that his debut feature?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course he had Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, and then this movie, and to release this kind of movie so early in one's career is pretty astonishing.
Yes,
and
it is.
He wins the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, which I think is an inspired choice.
Oh, yeah.
What's actually, I think, even funnier is if you actually look at who the president was of the jury at Cannes that year, was Tennessee Williams. And
how about that?
Yeah, he was the president of the jury that awarded Taxi Driver the best movie of the festival. So
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that's just interesting.
It is, yeah. And we should also mention another parallel with this current year, Paul Schrader,
That's right.
And a lot of people are like, how did he never get a nomination for Raging Bull or Taxi Driver? And yeah, so here he is with his first nomination this very year, 2019, for First Reformed. So long overdue.
And well, speaking of people getting their first nomination, Taxi Driver also marked the final nomination of the great composer Bernard Herrmann.
Yes.
Who died the day after he finished recording the score for the movie.
I love that. It's crazy.
Yeah. And he got 2 nominations that year because he was also nominated for Obsession.
Yeah. So how about that, Peter Finch?
Yeah.
Got 2 posthumous nominations. It didn't win either one, which is sad, but because I think Taxi Driver is such a phenomenal score by him, so iconic. Yeah, I really feel like it would be a tough call for me in Best Actor to choose between Robert De Niro and Peter Finch. That would be really tough.
Not for me. I would go Peter Finch all the way.
Well, I just feel like that's such an iconic role from De Niro that I wish he had an Oscar for it. But happy that Peter Finch could get one too, obviously. We've outlined exactly why, so I don't need to get into it. And then the other one is Bound for Glory. And I say the other one intentionally because it is the one that is forgotten in this Best Picture lineup.
It's one I've never seen.
Yeah, I had to really seek it out to try to even find it because not really available anywhere.
Yeah.
As far as streaming, which sucks because it's a Best Picture nominee, so you would hope that it would be. But The Tale of Woody Guthrie, folk legend, the long film. I did end up seeing it, and it's just very quiet and nice. And I think a lot of the appeal is in like the music itself and like the general calm attitude that Woody Guthrie puts forward in his music, and also obviously the protesting of the various ills going on with, unions and things like that. So I think it's a clear fifth in this Best Picture lineup, but it's not the worst by any means. So David Carradine is playing Woody Guthrie, does not get a nomination for lead actor, which was a bit of a surprise at the time. Mm-hmm. I think we got a question about that. Yeah, sort of. Just from Mark Lamb, who said Best Actor that year was notable for all the omissions. Giannini seems to be the surprise. Who did he replace? Redford or Hoffman, All the President's Men, Woody Allen, The Front, or my guess, David Carradine, Bound for Glory. How does Bound for Glory get a Best Picture nomination without Carradine?
I would guess David Carradine. So
yeah, I would too. Yeah, it's a solid performance. It's not, I think the reason it's probably snubbed is it's very even-keeled kind of performance, and again, not the biggest sort of thing that Oscars go for when we have things like Peter Finch getting nominated and Robert De Niro and Sylvester Stallone all being very big performances. So Drew Chouanier said, many argue this is pound for pound one of the best Picture lineups ever.
Well, I could definitely. Well, I can't speak to Bound for Glory, but with those other four, Network, Taxi Driver, All the President's Men, Rocky, absolutely.
Yeah. Having seen all of them, again, Bound for Glory does stick out slightly, but I wouldn't say any of them are bad, which is sometimes half the battle as far as a totally great Best Picture lineup. I would almost argue that the one I'll be talking about next week is even better, which is 1975.
Yeah, that's actually the one I was thinking of also.
Yeah, but more on that later. So let's talk about some other movies that came out in 1976 for our Should Have Been a Contender segment. And these are other films not nominated for Best Picture, but Oscar nominated, or just any old movie that came out in 76. So, Charlie, what do you got for me?
All right, well, the first one I definitely want to talk about, and it is nominated, Marathon Man.
Okay.
Marathon Man. Oh, God. That movie is another Dustin Hoffman movie with a chilling performance by Laurence Olivier.
Nominated.
As a Nazi dentist. If those two words put together don't send chills up your spine, I don't know what does.
Yeah.
But it's a great old-fashioned, or not old-fashioned, but it's just a great thriller. You're at the edge of your seat. You don't know what to believe in. And it's scary. It's horrifying. It's wildly entertaining. Have you ever seen Marathon Man?
I still have not seen Marathon Man.
Oh, then it's not safe. That's the line that Laurence Olivier has when he's trying to get information out of Dustin Hoffman.
Okay.
He keeps on saying, "Is it safe?" And Hoffman doesn't know what to do, and it's the most terrifying scene of the movie because he is using dental equipment.
Excellent.
Oh God. You just hear him saying, "You have quite a cavity here," and you're just like, "Oh God." and Olivier wins the Golden Globe for it. Very deserved win. I mean, some people might say that was just them going for Olivier, but man, he is so chilling in that movie, and I don't think we had ever seen him at that level before.
Yeah,
and showing that in his twilight years, he could still knock him dead.
Excellent. Yeah, that's the one I wanted to check out because I hadn't seen it and never got around to it, sadly, but a good recommendation. Right. Yeah. Well, I guess speaking of chilling, I have certainly a few good horror movies to talk about once again. We should definitely mention Carrie. Which is an Oscar nominee for Sissy Spacek, and Piper Laurie, who was returning to the screen for the first time in 15 years since The Hustler, I believe. And so she is incredible as Carrie's mother, Margaret, the epitome of the religious zealot, basically, who will just go to any means necessary to protect her child. And that includes hurting her child.
Abusing her child.
Yes, so that's ironic.
Sissy Spacek. Oh God, she is so good at this. She gives this magnificent performance, but she's stunningly beautiful. But the way that she uses her beauty to kind of make Carrie seem like this very. Or show Carrie as this very cut-off person who's just, not allowed to, or doesn't understand really a lot about herself, and that's about anything that's going on with her life, and that's shown in the opening scene in the movie, where she gets her first period in the middle of showering after gym class. And she has no idea what's happening, of course, because her mother, believes that whole thing is evil, and that we don't teach children about such things, and she automatically just makes you just so sympathetic for her.
Right.
As horrifying as her powers are, you're rooting for her. You want her to just be happy. And then, of course, when she feels like that, and then it's all taken away by the jackass high school kids, which include a young John Travolta.
Of course.
Yep. And that's when she just she burns the house down.
Exactly. Yes. And that is such a great sequence also, just from a filmmaking standpoint, the way everything just becomes quiet, and it just... like everything in her eyes really throughout the whole movie, but especially in that scene, her eyes, the way they dart around, are just so powerful and genuinely terrifying.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Yeah.
I saw that movie I saw that movie before I saw Network. I watched it with my mom and my stepdad. I guess when I was like maybe 10 or 11. We had interesting movie nights.
Yes.
But that was just, it's scary. It's scary right up to the last minute, and does a great job of sometimes lulling you into a false sense of security with images of serenity.
And then being like, oh God.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And I just love how he will use the shrieking violins like Herman used in Psycho.
Yeah.
When my personal favorite is when Carrie's walking home from school, and this idiot kid, 5 years old or something, is riding his bike, and he yells at her, "Crazy Carrie, crazy Carrie," and you just see her with her eyes, and the shrieky violins come, and then it's just knocked over on his bike.
Yes. It's a great movie. It's really great. Also, the book is good, I must say.
Yes, it is. It's absolutely good.
Yes. Well, while we're on this track, I just wanted to mention another favorite of mine, The Omen.
Omen, yeah.
Yay, The Omen. First of all, from an Oscar standpoint, I will always find it hilarious that song was nominated for Best Original Song.
It's great. I love it.
Ave Satini. And that is basically, it opens the film. It is a Latin chant about praising Satan. and it was nominated for Best Original Song, and it was
Proof that
performed on
Hollywood
the
is a-
show.
Proof of that Hollywood is a bunch of devil worshippers.
I mean, it's right there, you know. It's so obvious. It's right in front of our faces.
Oh god, that movie is so chilling, and it's so good though.
Yes, it is.
And it wins Jerry Goldsmith an Oscar for Best Original Score, which
That's
is
right.
awesome because that score is fantastic.
It is a good score. Again, I probably would have gone with Taxi Driver, but I could not knock that Omen score. It still holds up, I think, and that you can't say that a lot for some horror films. So,
and it was so interesting to see Gregory Peck in
God,
a horror movie.
Yes.
You know, what's interesting is that 2 years later, 2 years after this, he would play one of the most ultimate villains in the form of Dr. Joseph Mengele in The Boys from Brazil.
Yeah,
with Laurence Olivier, actually.
There you go.
But like, you know, to see him, you know, still in you know, in his older years, still choosing to take really interesting roles.
Yes.
You know, when you could just, you know, when he could just like coast along, you know, doing, you know, really just mundane things, but to really be interesting, and then just like truly, like Peter Finch, you know, he goes for it.
Yeah,
and he
I know.
is and
Very
he's
committed performance.
Yeah, and he's sensational in it.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
And so I'm curious, speaking of The Omen, which scene from The Omen freaked you out the most when you first saw it?
Well, probably because the film kind of takes its time getting to it. That sort of portion is probably the scene where the nanny just hangs herself.
Yeah, that's the one.
I think it's just so well edited and framed that it's just so jarring.
Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah.
And that and the mother's death also.
Well, yes.
Yeah, that one is just like, that's when it really goes to like, oh shit, this kid is trouble.
Yes. Both times that she falls are some of the most harrowing scenes. Yeah, it's ugh. And going back to Gregory Peck, I have to say, just the look of him, I think, like the eyebrows and just like the way he looks, it's so good for like a horror film. I don't know, it's hard to describe, but he just like really fits kind of the dark world that you wouldn't expect him to, but it just kind of works, you know?
Absolutely. No, he absolutely does. He absolutely does that. And you're just like, wow, why couldn't we have had him do something like this earlier?
I know. Yeah. So, do you have any others here?
Oh, I got a couple others.
Okay.
One I would say is one that was mentioned by our person. I can't remember which reader it was that submitted a question about possible sixth place best actor, but The Front.
Oh, okay.
Is a really interesting movie. It's a really good movie. It's Woody Allen plays a writer who ends up basically being a front person for someone who has been blacklisted, and he takes their scripts and puts his name on it. And it's a dramatic movie, but it does also have some funny moments to it because, you know, he's a comedy writer and that sort of thing. But I will say, I think probably the most surprising thing about that movie is the performance given by Zero Mostel in that movie as this person, as this comedian that's being whose career is being really shredded by rumors of being a communist sympathizer.
Mm-hmm.
It's a heartbreaking performance, but it's just wonderful. Because we usually know him as being so, you know, boisterous, you know, from especially like, you know, in The Producers, when he's just, you know, just going off the wall and everything. But he gives such a beautiful performance in that movie. If you're able to find it, you absolutely should see it.
Yeah, I was thinking like, you know, Woody Allen. Like I thought it might actually be a Woody Allen film, but
it's not.
Right. So I'm like,
yeah, he did
not.
I've
seen, I'm like, I don't know.
He didn't write it or direct it.
Right.
He just acted in it,
which is rare.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's excellent.
I'd also say I don't think it's a masterpiece, but definitely there's this screwball comedy called The Ritz I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No.
It was a play by Terrence McNally. It basically is this Italian family. The father dies, and he puts out a hit on his daughter's husband right before he dies. And so the husband, the son-in-law, gets into a cab in New York and says, just take me any place where the last place where someone would think to look for me. And it takes him to a gay bathhouse called the Ritz.
There you go.
And hijinks ensue. It's probably, you might think it's really dated, but it's still solidly funny. You have F. Murray Abraham playing this really raging queen, which is one of the greatest things I've ever seen. I don't care if it's dated or un-PC. It's still funny. And you also have Jerry Stiller, the recently departed Kay Ballard is in it. Treat Williams as a whose body has matured but voice hasn't. So he speaks with a high-pitched voice like this.
Oh boy!
And you also have as the bathhouse's in-house entertainment, Googie Gomez. It's the role that won her a Tony on Broadway, and she got nominated for a Golden Globe.
Mm-hmm.
And she just steals the show. She's so good in that movie. If you're able to find it, it is on DVD, and you should be able to find it. The Ritz, it's hilarious.
Yeah, this is a great cast. Yeah.
Yeah. Were there any other movies you had in mind, or?
Well, it's not for reasons that I think it's great, but just because it's interesting. A Star is Born. Okay. Let's just bring it up because it's obviously somewhat relevant to these times. So this is the Barbra Streisand version, the first version to go into music rather than acting. It is not great.
It feels like it's gay blasphemy to say it out loud.
Yes, I'm trying to be delicate here. Yeah, I mean, Barbara, she has a great voice, and the songs are solid.
I will never forget when I was talking a month or two ago, before the new Star is Born came out, I was talking with my mom about it. My mom was talking to me about how she saw the poster of Chris Christopherson and Barbra Streisand. And first of all, they both had insane hair. Yes. So their hair is all over the place on the poster. Hair. And my mom thought Chris Christopherson was really sexy at the time. But but seeing that poster, she was just like, oh no.
Not this. No.
Yeah, exactly. And my mom was Barbra Streisand too, but she was just like, nope.
About that perm, yeah.
Yeah.
It's long, and it takes some different diverging paths, and it's yeah. I'm glad it was remade. Let's just say that. And
so I think that was the last taste that we had in our mouth when it came to Star is Born.
Exactly, yeah. Slightly good, better, updated, yeah. But it is what it is. I appreciate that it has a bit more of a feminist sort of take on this relationship compared to the first two. But on the whole, not necessarily worth watching. If you are going to watch a Star is Born film, it would probably be the last one you should watch. But still worth noting, obviously, for our purposes. We did get a question somewhat about this. This is from Ian Balakalak, who said, do you think Gonna Fly Now from Rocky should have won Best Original Song over Evergreen from A Star is Born?
You know, I meant to listen to Evergreen before this podcast. I didn't get around to it. I do like that Paul Williams has an Oscar because I just find Paul Williams to be an amusing individual.
Okay, yes.
I just think he's funny. He won. He was a featured artist on Daft Punk's album Random Access Memories, and because of course Daft Punk stays in character, when they won Album of the Year, they had Paul Williams give the speech.
Oh yeah.
And Williams had one of my favorite lines I've ever heard in an acceptance speech when he said, it's weird. When I was drinking and using, I used to see things that weren't there and were frightening. And then I got sober, and 2 robots called me and asked me to make an album with them. So I'm glad he had an Oscar, but I would absolutely say, yeah, Good to Fly Now. You don't even need to know. I didn't even know it had lyrics for the first couple of years. It wasn't until later I learned it had lyrics, but you know that theme. And when you hear that, you're just like, I'm gonna run up the stairs of wherever I am right now. It doesn't matter where you are. Hell, here in Virginia, they used it in a political ad for a 70-something-year-old state senator to show that he still had it.
He still got it.
Yeah, Chuck Colgan, he still got it. I'm not joking. You can find that ad, Chuck Colgan, 2003 re-election.
Yes. Look that up, people.
It's, I absolutely, because I think that would really stand the test of time. It's just inspiring.
Well, I think Ave Satini should have won.
I can't argue with that either.
Period. Moving on.
So, I guess one other movie I do want to bring up, and I guess you can technically say it was 1976. I know it premiered in 75. But I don't even think it got a proper U.S. release because it was so controversial. And I am talking about Pier Paolo Pasolini's movie Salo.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yes. Which I'm kind of perplexed is available on Criterion.
Yes.
Because I find myself thinking, okay, I know it's notorious, but is it important enough to merit this kind of attention? If you want to make Taxi Driver look like Child's Play, I think that this is probably the movie to do that. It's just a disturbing movie. I was wondering if you just had any thoughts on that.
I haven't brought up the courage to watch it.
Then you are a more sensible person than me.
Yeah, isn't it also like very long?
I don't. It's like 2 hours.
Okay, maybe I mixed it up with something else, but regardless, whenever I think about seeing it, I collect like Criterion Blu-rays and things like that, but whenever I see it, I'm like, it's important. It's notorious. Isn't it? I don't know if it is important really, but I'm like, well, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's, just for the fact that it's, based on a book by the Marquis de Sade, that's like your first red flag.
Yeah. That's your declarative statement about 1976.
Well, I think we should also just mention this was the year that also Alfred Hitchcock released his final feature, Family Plot. I've actually never seen that movie. But that ended up being his final feature film.
Yes, good to note that. I seem to remember something else.
King Kong?
Yeah, King Kong happened. We should note it is the debut role of Jessica Lange, so that is something.
It also had Jeff Bridges and Charles Grodin. And the iconic, beautiful World Trade Center at the time that Kong has his last stand on.
That's right, yeah. We did actually get a question about King Kong from Kevin Clowder, who said, why did Ampus play along with the fuckery with King Kong's visual effects Oscar, where Carlos Rambaldi won for the robot that was barely used, but Rick Baker received no recognition for designing and performing in the ape suit? And for that matter, how the hell did King Kong get a Best Cinematography nomination? Okay, so Kevin Clowder is very worked up.
Guess is as good as mine on that one.
Yes, it's.
I did not know it had a cinematography nomination.
Yep, it's there.
Oh God!
Along with A Star Is Born, I believe too. Interesting year for that category. I think honestly, I was looking up since I seen the question why there was that discrepancy with Rick Baker not getting a nomination, and turns out he was uncredited on the film. So that would probably explain it. I don't know why he was uncredited. Seems like a...
Well, I think because at the time he wasn't Rick Baker.
Okay, well, still. Yeah, I think it's just probably a technicality sort of thing.
Probably, yeah.
Unless you have any others, we can move on to our final segment.
I don't see any others. I know I have friends that like Murder by Death, so I'll just give that a shout out, even though the Peter Sellers character is insanely racist, so, but it's fun to have, it's fun to have all those people in a movie,
Yes, and I believe Truman Capote, yes.
Oh, yes. Truman Capote is in that movie.
Yeah. 1976 is a fantastic year, as we have clearly outlined here. So when we come back, we will be delivering our verdict as to whether Rocky deserved Best Picture or if Network should have taken it.
The films nominated for the Academy Award this year are All the President's Men, a Wildwood Enterprises production, Warner Brothers, Walter Colbin's producer. Bound for Glory, the Bound for Glory Company production, United Artists, Robert F. Blumoff and Harold Leventhal, producers. Network, a Howard Gottfried Patty Chayefsky production, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, United Artists, Howard Gottfried producer. Rocky, a Robert Chartoff, Irwin Winkler production, United Artists, Irwin Winkler and Robert Chartoff producers. Taxi Driver, a Bill-Phillips production of a Martin Scorsese film, Columbia Pictures, Michael Phillips and Julia Phillips, producers. And the winner is Rocky, Irwin Winkler and Robert Chartoff, producers.
And we're back. So now we will be revealing our verdict as to whether Rocky deserved Best Picture or if Network should have taken it. Charlie Bright, what is your verdict?
Rocky is great, but personally, Network will always be tops for this year. As I said, it's a very close second behind The Godfather as my favorite movies. I absolutely would have gone with Network. However, I would be fine with Rocky won Best Picture, but if Lumet had won Director.
So you would have liked to split, yeah.
I would have loved a split because I think Lumet brought, Lumet was part of this first generation of filmmakers that had come from television to motion pictures. And I think that really stood out in the way that he directed Network. And as brilliant as Patty Chayefsky's screenplay is, I think that movie would be nowhere near as memorable if it weren't for the way that he directed it.
I totally agree.
And I also think, even when it comes to New York directors, you mainly think of people like, Woody Allen, Martin Scorsese, but Lumet is right up there too. And he knew how to film New York beautifully. I guess you'll be talking about this in your next episode with Dog Day Afternoon.
That's right.
He knew how to capture that so brilliantly. And I absolutely would have loved to have seen him win the directing award for this, because he did win the Globe for directing.
That's right, yeah. Yes. And that kind of established it a little bit as a possibility, but then it did not translate.
Yeah. When Avildsen went to DGA, I think that really sealed the deal.
And not to make it totally personal and about careers and stuff, but when you see John G. Avildsen winning for directing over Ingmar Bergman, Sidney Lumet, Alan J. Pakula, and even Lena Wertmuller for that matter.
Yeah.
I think it's not the best choice on the Academy's part for the long run, but
absolutely.
But
it is what it is, but I would have gone with Network. I think Network should have won, but I can't take anything away from Rocky.
Yeah,
because that was a win that was very deserved for the movie it was, for the time that they were living in. And I think, it's a credit that, both those movies still stand the test of time. They're still amazing movies to watch.
Absolutely. Yeah. Expanding it out to the entire Best Picture lineup, I don't think I even gave my verdict. Sorry. I would be Network, just in case it wasn't clear. Definitely Network. Yes. I would say that expanding it out to the rest of the field, I would put All the President's Men above Rocky, to be honest. As far as Taxi Driver, that's debatable. I kind of think Rocky works as a more complete film than Taxi Driver. So that's probably what I would say. And then, Bound for Glory, we talked about that.
Good for you.
Good for you. You made it into the lineup. Aw. Yeah. So I don't know if you had any different thoughts about any other films that you would prefer to win Best Picture, or if it would just be Network.
It would just be Network.
Yeah, I think I agree.
I still revisit it all the time, and it's still just, it's one of those films where every beat, the same emotions hit me, and I still get this amazing experience of watching it, and the crazy times that we live in only make it more resonant.
Totally agree. Yeah, even today. Yep. And speaking of that, let's finish with one last question from Greg Adams, who said, what would win in a 2019 Rocky versus Network rematch?
Oh man, I don't know. It seems like movies like that have like that tone of Rocky are more just relegated to, here's a couple nominations for you.
Yeah.
Like they wouldn't get 10 nominations now. I think of that along the line of movies, like Hidden Figures, and I was going to say The Help, but no, I don't think The Help belongs to that, because Hidden Figures is complete and a good story. It's schmaltzy, but it's good schmaltzy. There's nothing that says that schmaltzy is necessarily bad.
Right.
So, and I think Rocky would probably fit into that. I actually probably think All the President's Men would probably be a better fit for that. I know he asked Rocky versus Network, but I actually think All the President's Men would probably, because I think Network would be still, even as eerily prophetic as it still is, it would still be viewed as kind of surreal.
Yeah. And
surreal doesn't usually do well at the Oscars.
Right. Yeah.
It did last year with Shape of Water.
Slightly. Yeah.
But yeah. I think that I think All the President's Men probably would have been better positioned.
I agree. I think that's exactly what I was going to say. All the President's Men. I'm going with the third party choice here.
Especially in a preferential ballot.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. And honestly, I think Rocky probably is second, and Network is probably third. Just because it's just not the type of film that wins nowadays. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, the Oscars always surprise us. And and there's a good chance that we could be in store for, something very, very unorthodox with this year's Oscars as well.
Correct. Yes. So with that, I want to thank you, Charlie, for coming back on with me again. This was a very fun year to talk about.
I had so much fun talking about this.
Yes. So tell the people where they can find you on the internet if they want to hear more of your thoughts.
Well, if you would like to hear my wonderful thoughts, you can purchase my book, Why Poor People Should Be Shot into Space, and other ideas.
My goodness.
I have been able to find a publisher, so it's just a bunch of loose leaf paper with string tied around it.
Sounds about right.
You can find me on Facebook at Charles M. Bright. Just let me know that you saw that you found me through this. Don't just send a random friend request. I'll probably accept it. You can also find me on Twitter at Charles Bright, where you can usually find me posting 280 character thoughts on politics and film.
And you can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Jacobson. You can find the show at Oscar Runner Up. The show is on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play. Rate, review, subscribe. And now I'll leave it up to you listening to decide whether you think Rocky deserved Best Picture or if Network should have taken it. And you can do that by going to my website at filmtrophies.com or emailing me at filmtrophies@gmail.com. So once again, thank you, Charlie.
My pleasure.
And I will bid you all adieu.